So as I'm walking towards the bus, I check for see if I see any leaks or wet spots on the ground, any children or animals around.
Any children or animals?
Turn to make sure your wheel is always to the left.
All the way to the left.
Yep. And pop into it. I'm checking my clearance lights to make sure they're not cracked or broken. They're clear and amber in color with no missing screws or bolts. Checking my windshield to make sure it's not cracked or broken. Check my molding to be sure they're all intact and in place. I'm checking my windshield wiper blades to make sure they're not dry rotted and they are good and in place. Checking my inspection sticker to make sure it's a current inspection sticker. I start by checking my brake fluid and make sure that it's at its proper level. I check my master cylinder to make sure it's not cracked, broken with no leaks and it's not damaged and missing any hardware. Check my brake booster to make sure it's not cracked or broken and not missing any hardware and that it's tight and secure. Checking my power steering fluid to make sure that it's at its proper level.
And that's the alternator.
In the back.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah.
The alternator and what was that? The power
Air compressor.
Air compressor. All right, the air compressor. All right.
It's at its proper level. Checking my transmission fluid to make sure that that's at its proper level. Checking my coolant to make sure that it's at its proper level with no leaks. Checking my battery for no corrosion, no loose cables, no frayed wires, and it's tight and secured in its place. Checking my water pump, which, like I said, you really can't see it, but if you point down to it. Checking my water pump that it's not cracked or broken with no leaks and it's belt driven. Alternator, air compressor, power stern, and water pump.
Belt driven.
Yeah, you gotta make sure for those you say not cracked, broken, no leaks, and it's belt driven.
Okay.
And you can say I'm checking my hoses to make sure that there are no holes and no leaks. Check my license plate. It's a one-time plate. Checking that it's not missing any hardware. Checking my bumper to make sure it's tight and secure with no missing hardware. Checking my lights to make sure they're clear in color, that they're not loose and they're not cracked or broken. And you kind of just touch both of them as you're talking about it because it's the same thing. Checking my lights to make sure they're tight, secure, no missing hardware, and they're not cracked, broken, and clear and amber in color. My tires, I'm checking my lugs to make sure that they are tight and secure. There are no rust and there none are missing. I'm checking my hub seal to make sure there's no leaks. Checking my rims to make sure that they're not cracked or broken with no re-welding. Checking my rotors to make sure they're not cracked or broken. Can you see it? Sorry. Checking my rotors to make sure they're not cracked or broken with no leaks. Checking my brake pads to make sure that they're not cracked or broken with no leaks. I forgot, help me, what's on the inside of the brake, on the outside of the brake pad, but you really can see it from the inside.
I think that's it.
That's the brake pad. On the outside is the something else.
The caliper, yeah. Brake calipers, which you have to see if you can do it on the inside. This is the brake caliper.
What? Okay, yeah.
The silver thing that's sticking out, yeah. That's the brake caliper. Inside the caliper is the brake pads.
Right.
So you just say, I'm checking my brake caliper to make sure it doesn't have any leaks and it's not cracked or broken. Checking my brake hose to make sure there's no holes and no leaks. My lower arm control, checking my lower arm control to make sure it's not cracked or broken and not damaged. Checking my tire rod, the outer tire rod to make sure it's not cracked, broken, or damaged. And the inner tire rod, checking to make sure it's not cracked, broken, or damaged. Checking my sway bar to make sure it's not cracked, broken, or damaged with no missing bolts or screws or hardware. The ball joints. This is one ball joint, this little blue looking thing right here. Can you see that?
What is a blue? Okay, yeah. Right there, ball joint. Yeah.
Checking the ball joints to make sure it's properly secured and not broken or damaged.
Okay.
Arm control, so you say the same thing, checking my upper arm control to make sure it's not cracked or broken or not loose with no missing hardware. Checking my springs. Checking my springs to make sure it's not cracked, broken, or damaged. Checking my shocks to make sure it's not cracked, broken, damaged with no leaks. So lower arm control, upper arm control, brake hose, sway bar, springs, shocks, ball joints, upper ball joints, lower ball joints, inner and outer tie rod. So checking my tires for 430 seconds, and I'm checking my tire pressure for 70 psi's. So tire pressure 70 psi's. The tread on the tires is 430 seconds.
For the front tire.
For the front. Checking my step to make sure it's tight, secure, with no loose screws, no missing bolts. Checking my mirror to make sure it's not loose, broken, no missing hardware. Checking to make sure it's not cracked or broken.
And clear.
And clear. Checking my door hinge to make sure it's not cracked or bent. Checking my window to make sure it works properly. Make sure it's not cracked or broken with no re-welding. That's your frame. All of this whole thing is your frame.
Okay.
Checking my drive shaft to make sure it's not cracked or broken with no leaks. Safe to make sure that it's properly secured and in place. Checking my windows to make sure all the molding is properly secured and in place. Check my lights to make sure there's not missing any screws or hardware and that it's clear and amber in color and not cracked or broken. Checking my lug nuts to make sure that there are not any missing or loose and there are no rust. Checking my hub seal to make sure they're not cracked or broken and no leaks. Checking my rim to make sure it's not cracked or bent or broken with no re-welding. Check my tire pressure to make sure it's at 70 psi's. Checking my tire tread to make sure that it's at 230 seconds. So I'm checking my rotors to make sure it's not cracked or broken. Checking my brake pads to make sure that it's not that they're not cracked or broken with not hanging or missing any screws and it's properly secured.
Mud flaps.
Yeah. Checking my leaf springs to make sure they're not cracked or broken.
Leaf springs?
Yeah, these things right here. Like I say, it's hard. You're not gonna, cause they're right. Real, but they close inside to the tire.
That's what I thought.
You really can't.
We could really.
Checking my gas cap to make sure it's tight and it's properly secured. Checking my exhaust to make sure that it's properly secured with no missing hardware and its hangers. And black set indicate hole or leak. The hanger that is hanging, and these are like the clips or holders or whatever they call them.
Hangers or clips.
Here again, you do have to do it again back here. Checking my lights and make sure they're not cracked or broken, clear in color, clear and amber in color, and my molding is in its proper place or intact. And you kind of just touch molding as you're talking the whole way through. Checking my door hinge to make sure it's not cracked or broken or bent, and no missing hardware. It's kind of more up this way. And then you kind of do the same thing. I'm checking my muffler to make sure it don't have any holes or leaks. The muffler is that silver can looking thing.
No
Back
holes,
there.
I'm sorry. Checking my gas tank. To make sure there's no holes or leaks, and I'm checking my straps to make sure they're intact and properly secured with no shiny spots shown, which indicates they're loose.
Okay, so the shiny spots would indicate they're loose.
You're right, that your straps are loose. Walk to make sure there's no debris and that my molding is all intact and hardware properly secured. Checking my railings to make sure they're tight and properly secured with no missing screws or bolts. Checking my first aid kit to make sure that it's full, and also my clean spill kit to make sure it's full. Checking my fire extinguisher to make sure it's current and that it's tight, secured, and properly intact. Checking my seats to make sure they're tight, properly secured, they're not loose or damaged. Checking my seat belt to make sure they properly works and they are secured and tight. Checking my storage box to make sure that it's properly secured, tight, and no missing screws or hardware. Checking my emergency exit door window to make sure it properly works. Also, there's another emergency exit that we won't open. And then you still got to do this one even though you did it on the outside, because inside you have to check 2 emergency exits.
Okay.
Really. Checking my emergency exit door to make sure it properly works with the hinges are not bent or broken. Checking my seats to make sure it's not loose and that it's not missing any screws or hardware. Check my fuse box to make sure I do have an extra fuse. Checking my ABS light to make sure it stays on for 3 seconds. Checking my horn. Checking my temperature gauge to make sure it goes up to its proper level. Checking my oil to make sure it's at its proper level, and my battery charge to make sure it's at its proper level. Checking my defrost to make sure it works properly above and below. Doing my emergency brake check.
And give it a little gas.
To make sure it holds and it works properly.
See?
High beam, low beam, left signal, right signal, 4-way flashes. Now I'm going to do the back. Left signal, right signal, brake, Reverse. Alright.
Forward.
And my forward. I gotta check my rear mirror, passenger mirror, to make sure it's clear, no cracks, not broken, and the molding is in its proper place, properly secured. Check my, make sure I have 3 triangles. Now let's see.